you so much, everybody. Thank you very much for coming along tonight, and it's a pleasure for you to be here. That's a pleasure for me to be here as well. It's great to be here. It's great to be anywhere. Just to get out of the house. I've had a lot of experience over the years. I've had a lot of experience, you know, having a few drinks, because I enjoyed a few drinks. And there was 3 drunks in a bar one particular night, and I happened to witness this, because I was the bartender. And they were sitting down at the counter, and the first drunk was kind of very sad about himself, and he was kind of, the tears were in his eyes. And the second drunk said, What's wrong with you, Michael? My God, he said, I have a problem with my marriage. He said, what kind of a problem? He said, I think the wife is unfaithful. He said, how do you know? Well, he said, I'll tell you. She's having an affair now. She's having an affair. I came home from the pub the other night, and because when I walked into the bedroom, she was in the bed already when I got in, and when I came in, didn't I notice that she was having an affair with a plumber? The other fellow said, how do you know he was a plumber? Well, I'll tell you. He said, you can figure it out yourself. He said, I just seen sticking out from under the bottom of the bed a plumber's wrench. What would that make you think? Because he said, you have her. You have her. He says, I've had that problem as well, funny enough, he said, and it was another tradesman my wife was having an affair with. And how did you discover it? Well, he said, I come home, he said, one particular night too, and because he said, I went into the bathroom and I went in to have a shave and a shower and a shave and a shower. And I noticed that the hot press was half open and half closed. And didn't I see a saw standing up in the hot press and a chisel at the bottom of it? He goes to the fellow, well, you have her. Definitely she's having an affair with a carpenter. And the third lad, listening to them, finished off his pint and jumped down off the stool and started to run towards the door. And they said, where are you going? Oh, because he said, I'm going home. He said, because he's had me thinking now. They said, well, what about you, Ned? Is your wife having an affair? Because he said, she is. And it's not a plumber she's having an affair with, and it's not a carpenter. My wife is having an affair with a horse. And they said, what makes you think that? I tell you, you figure this one out. He said, I come home the other night, he says, and I was fairly scuttered, I have to admit. And he said, I walked into the bedroom, I took off my shoes, and I bent down to pick them up, and when I looked under the bed, didn't I see a jockey lying underneath the bed? A jockey under the bed. I love stories about drunks. So they're on the way home. The other 2 lads are on the way home that night, and one of them kind of strays, because when we leave a pub, we have a tendency in Ireland to lead each other home. And neither of us know where we're going. So this lad's and he's walking by the church. And he decides going by the church, he'd pop in. And when he goes into the church, he heads over to the confession box. And he goes in, and he sits down inside the confession box. And he falls asleep. And he's in there snoring. And suddenly the priest came out. And the priest had been hearing a confession on the other side. And when he turned around and slid back the thing, he could hear the snoring. And the priest is kind of knocking. And the drunk was still asleep. And the priest went, and he knocked really loud. And the drunk woke up. There's no point in knocking. There's no toilet paper in this one either. But I'm not just telling stories out of the woods. I remember one particular night, I remember several nights, but I remember one particular night, a pal of mine, one of my very, very best friends, and he had won something in the pub. So he went home to his house, and apparently when he went up the stairs, the missus was already in bed asleep, and he's making noise going around the room, and he's in the dark looking for the light switch. And she wakes up in the meanwhile, and with the available light that was in the bedroom, she couldn't actually see him. But she knew it was him. You know the way you'd know with the smell. So anyway, he came in, and she sees him struggling around, and she can see something under his arm. And she could only see in the silhouette. She said, what are you doing here at this hour of the night? And he says, it's the only place open. And he's walking around still looking for the light, and he has this thing under his arm. And she says, what have you got under your arm? Did you bring home a Chinese meal or what? No. This is a prize. I'm after winning a prize down in the pub. She says, well, what kind of a prize did you win in the pub at this hour of the night? He says, I'm after winning a duck. And suddenly she could see the head of the duck moving around. She says, you're coming home at 3 in the morning and you're after winning a duck in the pub. She said, were you playing cards or what? No. Were you playing snooker or darts? Not at all. I won the duck fairly and squarely. We were in the pub, there was a good few people in it, and we were waiting for the last orders to come up. And a couple of the lads and I decided we'd have a competition. Just what kind of a competition? We decided to have a competition for the fun of it. To see which lad amongst us had the longest. To see which of us had the longest will. To see which lad had the longest willy. And she sat up in the bed. She says, oh, sacred, merciful hour of the night. You made an exhibition of me. Just don't stand there and tell me that you showed all that's sacred. Don't tell me you showed all that's sacred amongst us in our marriage to a crowd of drunks. And he says, no, not at all. Just enough to win the duck. She's explaining that now to the woman. Oh, God, nice. I have a wonderful Uncle Tim, ladies and gentlemen, and this man will be well up into his 80s. And recently he was having problems with his feet. And they brought him over to the doctor, and he got out of the car, and he's making his way into the doctor's surgery like this, you see. And as he was walking into the surgery, he met a nun coming out. And this reverend nun coming out was in tears. The tears were flowing down her cheeks, and he couldn't figure out what was wrong. And he kept walking in towards the doctor, sitting at the desk. And as he walked in, the doctor says, gout! I just come in. I just come in. No, said the doctor, come in. He says, you have gout. No, he said, sit down there. This is a very clever doctor. He could tell in advance. And he said, you have gout. He said, sit down there and tell me about yourself, Tim. You haven't been with me for a while. He got, I haven't. He said, I haven't, no. He said, by the way, doctor, he says, I'm after meeting a nun coming out of your surgery, and the poor devil was crying. And the tears were rolling down her face. He says, do you mind me asking you what was wrong with her? And the doctor kind of laughed, and he says, well, he says, to be honest with you, Tim, he says, I've just told her she was pregnant. And Tim says, because, and is she pregnant? Not at all, says the doctor, but it cured her hiccups. And the doctor was looking at him and he was trying to weigh him up. And he said, Tim, he says, how is your health in general? He says, is there anything bothering you? Well, he said, to tell you the truth, doctor, there is. He says, I'm having a bit of a personal sort of a problem, and it's given me a bit of trouble. And the doctor says, what kind of a personal problem? Well, he says, I'm having a bit of trouble down that way. And the doctor says, down which way? He says, down, I'm having a bit of trouble with the bargain basement, you know. I'm finding that, you know, he's not as lively as he used to be. But the doctor says, well, he says, tell me about it. He says, what do you think the problem is? Well, he says, I'm not knocking the sport out of him as I used to do, you know. I think my sex life has gone off a bit. Well, he says, okay. He says, well, let's figure it out. He says, first of all, Tim, he says, can you describe the symptoms? Well, because I can. He says, they're the yellow cartoon family that they be on the television. Marge and Homer and Bart and all them. He said, not the Simpsons, you idiot. He says, describe, he says, what the problem is. Well, he says, I'm just not happy with the way it's going. The doctor says, fair enough, he says, now, he says, how is your libido? Well, he says, to tell you the truth, it's an old Mondeo I have. And I've had it for the past 25 years. It never gave me any trouble at all. I never bothered with them Japanese cars at all. Doctor said, hold on for a second. He says, just describe to me, he said, when did you first notice that your sex drive was gone? Well, he says, twice last night and 3 times this morning. So he says, well, look, he says, Tim, I'm going to prescribe something for you. And he says, you can go along to the chemist and get sorted out. So he wrote out the prescription, as doctors do in Latin. And he gave it to him, and Tim went down to the chemist. And when he went into the chemist, he gave it to a very pretty assistant who was behind the counter. And he gave her the prescription, and she had a look at it, and she had a look at him, and she had a look at the prescription again. And she said to him, she said, sit down there for a minute. And she went inside, and she came back out to him with a packet inside in a bag, you see? So he opened up the bag, and he noticed that while he was opening the bag, some of the other assistants were in behind looking out at him. And when he took out the little box, it was a little box of Viagra. The Viagra tablets. Look at all the lads. Look. All the lads, you know, I wonder what they are. You're not cutting me, lads. You know blooming well what they are. You do. They're the little blue tablets in the pack of 4. But no. I just said that some of the lads in the band were telling me about it earlier. And he couldn't believe it. And he went straight back into the doctor. And he was so furious. He was annoyed. And he kind of walked in. He forgot he had the gout talk. You know, come here, he said, who you lug you? Are you trying to make a gombeen man out of me or what? And the doctor says, what's your problem? He said, well, yeah, he said, I went up to the chemist, and because I gave in the prescription, and they hand me out a box of Vigoraya. And the doctor says, well, that's correct. He says, this is not a joke. He says, that's what I prescribed. What? He said, sure, it's gout I have. And the doctor says, that's correct. And he said, that's why I prescribed Viagra. He said, will the Viagra cure it? He says, no. He says, but it'll keep the blankets off your toes for a couple of weeks. dear goodness me. People sometimes tell me jokes. You know, you go into a bar, you're probably going in, you might even be only going in for a cup of coffee, and there's a fella, hello, I have a good one. I have a good one for you. You might be able to clean this one up. Some of the ones, you couldn't clean them with a power wash. But by the other token, children's jokes are wonderful. I remember being in a hotel, going back a year or two ago, and it was a mum and a dad. It was probably the granny and the two kids. There was a young boy and a young girl. And the young lad couldn't have been any more than 9. And he kept looking at me, and he came over to me, I have a joke for you. So I said, well, if you have a joke for me, stand there and tell me your joke. This is a joke about 2 cannibals. Now I'm thinking to myself, where is this child's mind? I mean, when I was his age, and anybody here tonight, when you were that age, when we told a joke, it was usually Paddy the Irishman, Paddy the Scotchman, and Paddy the Englishman. But here's a young fella telling me about 2 cannibals. And he described them as a father and a son, and they lived in this little village out in the middle of the jungle in Africa. And he's talking about them going out hunting one day. They have the grass skirt, and they have the bone through the nose, and half a bicycle wheel hanging out of the rear, and their hair up like that, and they're walking through, and they had the moccasin sandals on them like that, and they're going, Maga, Shigi, Laga, Mokoga, Ligo, Haga, Haga, and when they come to the edge of a hill, they look down into the valley, and down below in the valley are people. And it turned out that these people were missionaries. They were missionaries out picnicking. And the cannibals tell them, the father's telling them, that's telling them we'll go down slowly and we won't make noise. So they start walking down the hill, and the hill got very steep. And as the hill got steep, they found themselves running out of control, and they were jumping, because they were running through the high grass, you see. And they don't wear underpants, cannibals. And with the noise they were making coming down the hill, the missionaries down in the valley heard them coming down, and they all started up their mopeds. The missionaries were on mopeds. And they all started up their mopeds, and they skedaddled out of the valley, heading off, and the 2 cannibals came down, and there they are looking at about 6 or 7 missionaries heading off on motorbikes, and they're looking at them disappearing. Meals on wheels. But as they went off, the father noticed somebody swimming. A human was swimming in the lake. A very beautiful looking woman. They could only see her head because she was swimming in the water. The father, by the way, this was a 9-year-old told me this. And as the woman swam towards the shore, she decided to get up and walk out of the lake, you see. And, you know, she had nothing on, up on top. And the father, and the young fella trying to look out, and as she walked out, and as the water level dropped, it revealed that she was wearing a G-string, a thong. And as she's walking out of the lake towards the shore like this in her thong, and the father, and the young fella's in there, and they're waiting to ambush the woman coming towards them. And as she gets close, the young lad couldn't control himself. Now, this was a 9-year-old told me this. The young lad couldn't control himself anymore, and he rushes out in front of the father. And he looks at the beautiful woman, and he says, Papa, Papa, why don't we bring her home and eat her? And the father says, no, 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 no. We bring her home and eat your mother. Oh, dear God. 9 years of age. Now, children will hang you. They will hang you at any chance that they'll get. I remember one particular evening we were all sitting at home in my house, and we were there to welcome an aunt of ours, my Aunt Mary, who was an aunt that, I think every family has an aunt like this. You know, an aunt that you wouldn't be mad about. You know, because she was, she'd a beard. Now, this would be a simple description of her. She'd a beard on her, and she'd always have her teeth going up and down in her mouth. She was able to turn them over and back in her mouth while she was talking to you. And she used to dribble. She dribbled as well. And she was, you know, she big. Huge, actually. Huge. It was like looking at two bald-headed convicts trying to break out of prison. That's what it was like. And the kids, my own children, used to dread when she came, because she'd always want to hug them. And she'd nearly smother half of them. And then when she'd have them nearly smothered, she'd be drowning them with the spits. And she was sitting down and she was having a bit of grub with the rest of us. And my eldest daughter, who at the time, you know, was kind of young, she was observing the aunt by walking around her. She kept walking around in circles. And the aunt said to her, she says, what are you looking for? And my daughter said, I want to see your other face. And the aunt says, what do you mean, my other face? Well, she says, Mommy and Daddy always say that Auntie Mary is two-faced. Oh, dear goodness me. One of the wonderful things in our life, ladies and gentlemen, as you know, are our friends and our neighbours in particular. And myself and my wife Eileen have a wonderful neighbour, and her name is Lily. Now, Lily would be on in the years, and she lives right next door to where we live, you see. One particular evening, myself and my wife were sitting in, it was an evening we decided not to go out. And it was the mercy of God that we were there. Because we were sitting in the house and we were having our bit of grub, and next door, Lily was sitting down and she was sewing away, as she does. And her husband, Tommy now wouldn't be the sharpest knife in the drawer. And Tommy was sitting down snoring and drinking a can of beer and catching flies with his mouth open. And Lily was there, very content, sewing away, everything was fine. And all of a sudden her phone rang. Sorry, did I give you a fright, didn't I? It was a loud phone. And when the phone rang, Lily, before she answered it, instead of her sticking the needle in her ball, you know, no, seriously, is it a ball? What's the ball that the girls have for sewing? What's that called? A bobbin, is it? A bobbin. Well, instead of her sticking the needle into that, didn't she get the needle and she kind of put it in between her lips, like that? And she was sitting there with the needle in between her lips. She picked up the phone, and when she brought the phone to her mouth, she hit the needle and sent it spinning right down her neck. And she broke into a panic. Now, it's just as well myself and Eileen were there, next door, because we heard her roaring. And we said, something's up. And we ran out the back door, cleared the hedge. I'm talking about straight over it. I went around the hedge that way. And I came in the gate from the other side. But the wife jumped over it, you see. And we ran up into the back door of her house. She was there, her face was red. She looked as though she was in a very, very serious health situation, in danger. And Tommy was running around the house. He was like a headless chicken. He couldn't do anything to help. And he was roaring and bawling. Oh, gee, the roars of him and the balls of him. So anyway, he ran. Some of you have minds like sewers. And he was roaring and bawling, and we went over and we calmed Lily down and we called the ambulance, and the ambulance were out very, very fast. They took her into the back of the ambulance and we followed into the hospital in our car. And when she went in, a lovely doctor came out to greet her, a local doctor. And he came over, he said, very, very glad for docking. I'm very, very glad to welcome. He lived local. I think he was Welsh. So he took her into the X-ray department. They got an X-ray very, very quickly, and they brought her back up to his little room, you see. And he held the X-ray up like that, and he said, the news is good. And she was kind of... What's good about it? Well, he said, I can see here on the X-ray that the needle it is beginning to go into your digestive tract, but fortunately, it is pointing in the right direction. Because if it was sideways, it could choke you. But it is pointing in the right direction, and what will happen is it will take a natural course through your digestive tract. It will go into your urinary tract then, and in about 48 hours, it will make a natural exit. And she says, thanks very much, I appreciate that, doctor, I do. And before she got out of the chair, she says, by the way, doctor, she says, I have a problem with that. Well, he said, tell me what your problem is. Well, she says, you're telling me that the needle is going to go right through my system and come out that way. That is correct. Well, here's my problem. Said my husband is a hopeless romantic. I think you're ahead of me on this one. And he's very fond of me. And tomorrow, doctor, is our wedding anniversary. And being the wedding anniversary, he is more likely to be more romantic than usual. He says, no, come on, madam, get to the point. Well, she said, that's actually what I'm talking about, is the point. The point is what I'm talking about. I said, what's worrying me is if it's going to take 48 hours for the needles to go all the way through, and he wants, you know, to be extra friendly with me. I'm just wondering if he's likely to be in any imminent danger. Oh, he said, I know exactly what you're talking about, madam. Yes, but you have nothing at all to worry about. She said, that's very good. He said, no, nothing to worry about, madam. But just make sure he wears a thimble. You couldn't make it up. Woman down there, are you laughing or crying, ma'am? Look at her. She's wiping something anyway, that's for sure. Does anybody here tonight work in the county council? Do you see what I mean? Nobody works in the county council. Nobody. And I've been seeing them all through my years travelling around the length and breadth of this country. I've seen them as you travel the roads. You'll often see the county council worker standing at the side of the road in the high-vis jacket, and he breastfeeding his shovel. Did you ever see them at that, did you? I had a particular incident, and I was coming down from Galway to Shannon Airport, and I came around this bend. Now, I was fairly clipping along, to be honest with you. I was within the speed limit. Just. And when I came around this bend, the stop-go man was in the middle of the road like that. I could see the green sign up, and I said, thanks be to God. But you know what? This fellow was a sleevine when I think about it. I wasn't 30 yards from him, and the next minute, he turns around. Stop. And I stood on the brakes. And I barely stopped the car in time, and him grinning like a Cheshire cat. Big grin. So I stopped in the car, and I tried to get my nails off the steering wheel and get my head out of the windscreen. And I looked back at the guy with the stop-go, and he kind of done that to me. No, he was only telling me there's 2 more minutes. And in the time I was there, not even a bicycle came down the road toward me. So he stopped me for nothing. And I continued on the journey, and I picked up the people I was to pick up, and I said to them, do you have sandwiches with you? And they said, why? I said, well, because we're going to be stopped. This fella is going to stop me again. So we got a couple of sandwiches on the way up. And sure enough, when we came around the bend from the other side, we came around, and there was the guy. Only this time he hadn't time to stop me. I was all ready to stop. And he held it up like that. And I came to a halt and I annoyed him. I turned off my engine. As if I was expecting it. And I started having the sandwiches and we had the flask. And he's looking at me like that. And I kind of smiled at him out the window and I did. No, I was just telling him, this is my second time here today. And as I looked in at him and as he looked at me, I could see several county council workers. And they were all standing around a hole. This was the amazing thing. I always remember. There was about 7 or 8 of them, and they're standing around the hole, and they were all leaning on each other as they stood around the hole, you see, because the shovels hadn't arrived. And then I hear, it was like the Vienna Boys Choir. Happy birthday to you, happy birthday to you. And I said to the foreman, I said, excuse me, I said, whose birthday is it? He said, the whole. It's a year old today. And the lads are thinking of filling it in for his birthday. It was a story that my late father, Lord rest his soul, I remember a story he told me about a very, very wealthy farmer who lived close to him in Dunlavin in County Wicklow. And this particular farmer had a sheepdog whom he loved and adored. This sheepdog did everything for him. He used to go into the town to get some of the groceries and he'd bring them back with this shopping bag in his teeth. And he did lots of things for him. He came down for breakfast one particular morning, and when he came down to the bottom of the stairs and he came into the kitchen, he saw his wonderful dog, Shep, dead on the floor. I'm sorry. And Shep was lying dead on the floor, and he immediately said a couple of prayers for the dog, and he moved him gently over to the side. And being a man with lots of money, he decided the best thing he could do was to make sure that this dog had a proper burial. And he called the local undertakers, and he said to them, he said, this is Farmer Brown here. He says, my dog Shep has just died, and I wish to bury him properly, and I would like you to make him a beautiful casket of oak. And they made the most beautiful casket in double quick time. And they came out and they put the dog into the casket. Farmer Brown went out and he got into his car and he drove into the village. And he called into Father Breen in the church in the village. And he says, good morning, Father. And the father says, good morning. It's great to see you, Tom. What's your problem? He says, well, my dog Shep has died. Oh, goodness me, says the priest, that's shocking. That's a terrible loss to you. He said, it is. And he says, I'm heartbroken for him. And he says, I'm wondering, Father, if you'd be kind enough to offer the 11 o'clock Mass on Sunday for his repose. And the priest stood back and he says, well, he says, Tom, he says, this is the Catholic Church. He says, goodness me, he said, I'd like to help you. And he says, we'd love to do something like that for you. But he said, that would be a sacrilege for us to offer up a Mass for a dog. I'm sorry, Tom, he says, there's no way I could do this for you. Because he says, I'm very disappointed. Well, he said, look, Tom, he says, I tell you, he said, there's a new religious sect in the neighbouring town about 5 miles away, and he said they've just started gathering a congregation, and he said, I'm sure that the minister over there, they're up to all kinds of stuff, and I'm sure the minister over there would offer some kind of a service for your dog. Oh, because he said, well, that's kind of you, Father, I appreciate that, he says. Not at all, Tom, he says, we're here to help, he says. That's what the Catholic Church is all about, helping people out. He said, well, I'm delighted, he said. And Father, by the way, he says, do you think would the minister over in that other church, would he be embarrassed, you know, if I gave him a cheque for 25,000 euros? And Father Breen stood up and he said, "For goodness sake, Tom," he says, "why didn't you explain that the dog was a Catholic?" This is why we have to always relate to stories we hear between ourselves. My pal, Eddie, he got a phone call at about 11 o'clock one night. He was sitting down watching the TV, and the phone rang, and Eddie picked it up, half asleep. And he says, "Hello?" And the voice said, "This is the Coast Guard." And he says, "We have what we think is bad news for you. Your mother-in-law," he says, "has she been missing?" "Oh God," he says, "yes, she's missing now for the past couple of weeks." He says, we're thinking now we're reporting her." He says, "I'm thinking now," he said, "I'll have to inform the guards. I'm going to write to them tomorrow." And they said, "Well, there's no need to write to the Garda." Said that we've actually found her. We found her body washed up on the beach, and Eddie was... He said, "Well, that's the situation with her." When we found her, we noticed that there were 6 lobsters clinging to her body. She'd possibly been there for 2 or 3 days. "Because," he says, "how many?" 6. There were 6 lobsters clinging to her body. And they said, "We'd just like to know what we should do." And I tell you now, Susie, keep 3 for yourselves. Hold on to 3 for me. And set the trap again for tomorrow. It should not be allowed. That's why, ladies and gentlemen, that's why all the local stories are the very finest. As a matter of interest, I want to just say to you here tonight, I was reading up in an article recently in Ireland's Own. You all know Ireland's Own? Beautiful Irish magazine. And I was reading in this particular article something that startled me when I read it, that 1 in 3 Irish people today, this very day, 1 in 3, which scared me, because if it was 1 in 100 or maybe 1 in 1,000, you could live with that. But 1 in 3 of us, and I'm only quoting what I read in the magazine, it said that 1 in 3 people in Ireland today is a gobshite. One in 3 people in Ireland is a half-wit. That's very scary. So what I'd like you all to do here tonight is to have a good look at the person on your left. Don't make it obvious. Don't make it obvious. Just have a good look at them and then casually turn around to the person on your right and have a look at them. And the point I'm making is, if they both look okay to you, it is not looking good. I had reason, ladies and gentlemen, to go into the hospital some time ago, and I had to have a bit of surgery done on my foot. It was a kind of an emergency job, you see, and they brought me in and they wheeled me into the toll booth, as I call it in an Irish hospital. As you come to A&E, there's a toll booth, and you have to pay in. And the doctor was straight out. The moment I came to the toll booth, he was straight out, and he had a stethoscope, and he put it on me like that, and then he started moving it around like this. He nearly broke my ribs. He hit me like that, and he moving it around, and I'm saying to myself, does this doctor know what he's doing? I thought he was looking for my heart. I really did. It was me wallet he was looking for. He wanted to listen to see which ATM card would take the most punishment. And then they brought me up to the ward. And this very, very nice nurse, and she says, now, Mr. Grace, we just fill in some of your details. We have your information here, name, address, date of birth. That's fine. And she said, that's it. And she says, RC. And I said, yes, nurse, indeed. I said, Rice Krispies. No, she says, that's not what we mean. That's not what... She said, are you Roman Catholic? Or Church of Ireland? And I said, well, am I having an operation tomorrow? She says, you are. Well, say, which crowd have the best success rate? Because forever, I thought when you were filling in a form in the hospital, I always thought that the RC was Rice Krispies. And the P was porridge. That's what I thought. So they got me organised, and she says, now the bloods we take usually in the morning, and we take the temperature twice a day. Now, we also need a urine specimen. I said, that's not a problem, nurse. She says, good. She says, if you could just give it to us, she says, in that little bottle on top of the shelf. I said, from here? If I could fill it up from here, I'd be working for the fire brigade. But there was a man in the bed opposite to me, and he had just been taken down from the theatre, and they wheeled him into the ward, and he was coming out of the anaesthetic, had the oxygen mask on him, and the nurses brought him in on the bed that wheels, you know, they brought him in like this, and they wiped him down and dabbed him, and he's in the mask. Oh, nurse, where am I? And she says to him, she says, you're in the hospital. She says, you're in St. Lawrence's ward, in the hospital, and, you know, you're recovering, you're coming out of an anaesthetic. Okay. And she's walking away again, and he's like, no, will you do me a favour? She says, certainly, what do you want? Are my testicles blocked? She says, I beg your pardon? Now, bearing in mind that this was a mixed ward, a lot of the women heard what he'd said, so they were kind of leaning out of the bed to look. And the nurse said, she says, what did you say? Well, have a look and tell me, are my testicles blocked? And there was one woman in particular, and God love her, she had something on with her back, and she was leaning out of the bed like that. She went out on the traction all the way down the side of the bed to look out. And the nurse, being a professional as nurses are, the nurse said, certainly. And she got the bedclothes and she pulled them down as far as his ankles, like that, all the way down. And she got his... Will you let me finish? She got his hospital gown. Disappointed. And she started to raise it up to have a look. And he went berserk. He said, no, stop it, stop. And he pulled off the mask and he said, no, are my test results back? I was probably only there for a day when I had my first visitor. And I don't want anybody here tonight to think that I'm name dropping. But the first person into the hospital to see me was Daniel. And Daniel came in, and he didn't come into the ward. He appeared. He just all of a sudden was there. There was a haze, and when it cleared, Daniel was there. And Daniel came over to me. He says, "Och, how are you?" "Och, how's me old pal?" I said, "Daniel, I don't believe it." I said, "Och," I said, "I had to come up and see you. I figured you might like a companion to sit with you for a while for a wee chat." And I decided I'd have a wee chat and maybe sing a song or two for you. And then I broke down. I said the chat would be sufficient. There's no singing allowed in the ward. And he brought me up something, and in fairness, it touched me. A bottle of apple juice. And I said, "That's thoughtful of you, Daniel. I just wanted you to have it." And while I was talking to him, I was looking at the bottle, and I look up at the shelf. And I said, "Daniel, would you give me the little bottle, the little sample bottle for the specimen?" I said, "Would you give it down? Because they're sterilized, they're perfectly clean." I said, "Would you give it down?" And he gave it down. He says, "Have you no glass?" I says, "Well, I only want to take a drop at a time." He had no idea what I was going to do. So I put the apple juice into the little jar. And I put the lid back on the little sample bottle. And I gave it back to him, and I says, "Put it back up on the shelf if you wouldn't mind, Dan." And he put it back up on the shelf. And the nurse came around to do her daily stuff. And she took my blood, and she took the temperature. And then she says, "Okay, Dan." And she wrote out the little labels. "Now," she says, "Mr. Grace," she says, "did we go yet?" And I says, "Actually, we did." So I said, in fact, it's up there. I said, "That's a little sample I prepared earlier." I always wanted to say that, this is something I prepared earlier. And Daniel now copped on what I was up to. And he said, "Knock, you're an awful clown." You devil. And she took down the little bottle, okay? And she held it up to the light like that. And she shook it. And she looked at it. And she says, "Oh, Mr. Gray," she says, "we're very cloudy today. Aren't we?" "Is that right, nurse?" says I. I say, "Give it back to me here," says I. "And I'll run it through one more time." Are you having fun, are you? I'm delighted you came along tonight. Imagine if you didn't come along tonight, I'd be up here like a gum. On my own. But in all my years, ladies and gentlemen, in show business, it may look like a one-man show. But I've had a friend and a companion who has been at my side for almost all of those years. He's a young man who could easily be described as Ireland's oldest schoolboy, and he's my friend and yours. Will you welcome, ladies and gentlemen, Butler.
And when I was a little girl, when I was a little boy, when I was a small little boy, I got no love. Imagine I got no love. I came home from school one day, and I was very late getting home. And my dad said to me, "Why are you late coming home from school? It's nearly 6 o'clock in the evening." And I said, "Dad, it's because I was kept back at school for 2 hours extra." And he said, "Why were you kept back for 2 hours?" I said, "Dad, because the boy in the desk beside me was smoking." He said, "Well, if he was smoking, why did he keep you back?" "Because I'm the one that set him on fire." I remember when I was in school, the teacher didn't really like me. Our teacher had no favourites. He hated us all. And he looked down the classroom one day and he said, "Butler?" I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Who invented the thermometer?" Freddie Mercury.
Pockets O'Neill.
Yes, sir.
Who was the first woman in the world?
The first?
Yes.
Give us a clue.
First woman in the world. Apple.
Granny Smith.
No, the first woman in the world was Eve.
Why was the apple a clue?
Well, Eve, the Garden of Eden.
Oh, right.
Yeah. Now, it's a three-part question, and you have to answer each part in order to win the prize of a bag of sweets.
Okay, sir.
Now, you've answered the first one with a little help from me. The second part of the question is, who was the first man and woman in the world?
Eve and Adam. Adam and Eve.
Correct. That's 2 questions down and 1 to go.
Ooh, I'm looking forward to the bag of sweets.
Okay, the third question is, what was Eve's first words to Adam?
That's a hard one.
Correct. Most of our questions today are on the subject of general knowledge. Snodzer Quinn.
Yes, sir.
A question for you, and this time it is a 2-part question. And it's for the same bag of sweets, which we'll divide.
Okay. Okay, sir. 2-part question.
A 2-part question.
All right, sir. Sir, could you do me a favor? Could you ask me the second part of the question first?
Well, if that's what you want.
Yeah, I'd love that. I love a challenge.
Okay, the second part of the question for the half a bag of sweets. In what year did he die? Rasher Flanagan.
Yes, sir.
Over the number of years that the Earth has been in existence, there were several ages.
Okay, sir.
Could you name them?
Could you give me a clue?
Cement.
The Stone Age.
Correct. And give me another age.
The Bronze Age.
That's correct. Anything else?
And the Ice Age.
Lovely. And any more?
Yeah, the Sausage.
Pockets Finnegan.
Yes, sir.
Where are the Andes?
At the end of the wristy.
Get out from line. Out. And boy here, what is the difference between a buffalo and a bison?
Well, you can wash your feet in a bison.
Out. Razor O'Keefe.
Yes, sir.
What can you tell us about Damascus?
It kills 99% of all household germs.
Ronald O'Connor. What bird does not build his own nest?
That's easy, sir. A cuckoo.
That's the correct answer. And how do you know that?
Because everybody knows a cuckoo lives in a clock.
Pockets, you were late for school yesterday. You didn't come in till 11 o'clock.
Yes, sir. I had a problem. I had a problem yesterday. My poor granddad got burned.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Was he badly burned?
Well, they don't fool around in the crematorium.
Little boy here. Who built the Forth Bridge?
I don't even know who built the first train.
Today, pupils, we want to learn a little bit about you and about your families. Rasher?
Yes, sir.
Tell us about your family. Who's the head of your family?
Sir, the head of my family. The head of my family is my dad.
That's very, very good. And tell us a bit about him.
Sir, I can tell you that my dad is a very brave man.
That's wonderful to know. And explain how he's brave.
Well, because my daddy works in the fire brigade.
And the reason he is brave is because he could get a call in the middle of the night and he has to get out of bed and jump into the engine and drive it very fast with the bee-bog going. And when they get to the scene of the fire, they take the ladder off the back of the fire engine and he makes his way through the smoke and he finds the family who are there huddled in a corner, the mammy, the daddy and the two boys and the girl, and he helps them down the ladder to the safety of the garden in their neighbor's house. That is a brave father. Good man. Little boy down here. Yes, Eugene?
Yes, sir. Well, my dad is also the head of our family, and he is brave also. In fact, I think he's braver than his dad.
And how could he be braver?
Well, my dad works as a volunteer in the Irish Lifeboat Service. And when he gets a call in the middle of the night from a ship or a boat or a trawler in distress, and it could be a very, very wet, stormy night with a force 9 gale, and he goes down to the pier and they launch the lifeboat, and when they get to the scene of where the other boat is sinking, they throw a rescue line and they save all the men on board and they take them safely home in the lifeboat and they reunite them on the shore with their families, and they're all very happy. That's why he's brave.
Well, that is a brave dad. Fantastic.
And there was one little fella at the back of the classroom, and he was crying. He said, "Little boy down here?" "Yes, what's wrong?" And he said, Could you try someone else?"
"No, I'm trying you."
"Well, my dad is a coward."
That's not a nice thing to say about your father.
"No, my dad is a terrible coward, and I'll tell you why. Because last summer, when my mommy went away with the ICA for the long weekend to Donegal, my daddy was a coward." "Why?" "My daddy was afraid to sleep on his own. And he had to get the woman next door to come in and sleep with him in the house, and that's why my daddy